Hey guys, Sam here at LA Studios. Today I want to show you how you can get some massive drum sounds out of Logic just using the stock plugins. We're going to take it from sounding like this and make it sound like this. Let's jump straight in and take a look. So first off, we're going to do some parallel processing, but typically when you do parallel processing on drums, people automatically think of compression. We're not doing any compression here at all. We're doing kind of the complete opposite in a dynamic sense. So we're going to do some parallel expanding and then some envelope shaping as well. First off, let's do the expansion. So let's go to our mixer and we're going to go to a drum parallel bus. So I've sent my kick and snare to this drum parallel bus on bus 13. And on this channel, I've got an expander followed by another expander followed by an EQ. So what we're aiming for here is we just want to get the real point of the drum. We don't want any of the tail whatsoever. And then we want to add some high mid, high frequency information to that to get a real aggressive attack on that drum. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow those drums that we send to that bus to punch out of the mix in a really nice and dynamic way. So let's take a listen to this drum bus, just the parallel bus on its own. First with just one expander, then with two, and then with the EQ as well, and see exactly what we're doing. So here's the first expander, just the kick and snare going here. Sounds pretty good, but we can get that a little bit more pointy, a little bit more so there's less of a tail, by putting another expander in the chain. Cool. So that's taking off a lot more of a tail, so we're just left with that initial point. And then if we bring in the EQ, then we're getting the real aggressive high mid frequencies that we need to punch through a dense rock mix. So we're getting rid of any resemblance of a tail on those drums and just getting left with the initial attack, and then we're adding some EQs to that to let it punch through the mix. Let's take a listen without that drum bus engaged and then with it engaged, and we'll hear the difference. Okay, that's adding some nice attack to our drums. So we've got that initial hit dealt with. We're going to do something now which might not make a massive amount of sense until we move on to another step, but it's really important. We're going to deal with some envelope shaping here. So I'm going to go to my next bus that I've got, and this is my drum smash bus. And on here, I'm just going to solo this. I've got just the envelope shaper, and I'm taking out any attack. I don't want any of that initial hit on there. I just want the tail. So let's take a listen to that. So that's louder than it's going to be in the mix, but just so you can hear it. The way that I've done that is I've just gone on the time control, and you can see how the gradient of this slope changes. As I bring that over to the 100 milliseconds, it's going to get rid of that initial transient. So let's go from left to right and let's hear exactly what it's doing to the initial hits. And by the time I get to around 100 milliseconds, it's got rid of that initial point on the drum completely. So we've got two different sides of the drum kit there. We've got a parallel channel with just the initial slap of the drum, the initial point, the hit, the real attack. And then we've got another one, which is the complete opposite of that, which is just the tail. And we can blend the two of those in the mix. So let's bring up those two faders as we listen to our drums and get a nice balance between the two. There's our aggression. And that drum smash is just the tail end. If you take it away, you'll miss it. It's the length of the drums, it's the length of the kick, it's the length of the snare. So the third thing I want to do that Logic does extremely well is add some samples. Now, I'm not completely replacing these drums. They sound good as they are, but they just need a little bit of reinforcement just to get them up to that kind of aggressive rock sound that we all know and love, with a kick and snare punch through the mix. So we're going to do that in a really simple way. I'm going to select my kick channel and press Ctrl and D. What that's going to do is bring up my drum replacer or my drum doubler. I'm going to put that down to kick drum, and I'm just going to click OK. I'm going to do the same thing on the snare drum, press Ctrl and D, just select that to be snare, and then go on OK. So for these, I want to do something just a little bit special. So the sounds that we've got there, I'm going to deal with in just a moment. But I want these to be more, I don't want it to be completely one shot. I don't want it to just be one sample, but I want it to be less dynamic because I'm getting all the dynamics from the microphone tracks. So I'm going to go into my kick channel here, and this is the MIDI notes that my kick has produced on the doubler. I'm going to select them all, go to Functions, MIDI Transform, and then Random Velocity. And I'm just going to set that velocity in between 115, and then on the lower end, I want it to be 95. And then select and operate. And that means that all of those hits are going to lie somewhere of a random velocity in between 95 and 115. So pretty hard hits. I'm going to do the same thing to my snare. I'm going to select them all, Functions, MIDI Transform, and Random Velocity. I'm going to take those to exactly the same values. So once I close these, we're going to have some nice and leveled out drums there. But I haven't got the sounds that I want yet, because the sounds that come with Logic are fine. They're okay. You can kind of manipulate them a little bit, but they're a bit lackluster. Take a listen to the default ones that it loads up. Cool. So what I'm going to do here is go into the sampler, and I'm going to load up some new samples. I'm going to go to Load, and for this kick, I'm actually going to use one of my own samples from the NA Studios sample packs, which you can check out in the description down below. This is the kick drum, a 24-inch Tama Star Classic kick drum that I've got just behind me, recorded with a D6 microphone. Now this is punchy, and this is a big sounding drum. On the snare drum, I'm going to go and do the exact same thing. And for this one, I'm going to have a processed sound, which is a steel drum, and it's nice and aggressive. It's fat, it's rocky, it's punchy, it's everything that we want for this track. It's processed already, so I don't need to go in and process anything there. So I'm just going to go open, and that's going to load in. Fat steel snare 1 processed. So if I just listen to these two on their own, these are just the kick and snare samples. This is going to be aggressive. It's going to be slightly over the top. But when we blend these in a moment, you're going to start to hear the reason why we've got them there. Punchy. So what I want to do then is grab these two channels and bring them all the way down. Then when I bring my drum mix in, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to bring in those samples until they're just lying underneath, until they're just supporting the drums that are already there. That's what I want. I don't want to replace completely. I just want to support. I just want to augment those drums that are already there. So kick will be first. Nice and chunky, nice and punchy. Let's do the exact same thing with the snare drum. Nice. Let's hear it without those samples and then with. We're punching through the mix far better there. That's getting much more towards the kind of rock, punchy, aggressive sound that we're used to hearing. The last thing I want to do is a drum reverb. And I'm not going to use this reverb in the typical way that we would use a reverb with a long tail and a massive room kind of thing. That's not really what I'm going for here. I'm just going for a little bit of ambience. So let's go to my mixer, and I'm going to go down to my drum reverb. And I'm just using Space Designer here, going into a compressor. Remember, this is just all stuff that comes stock with Logic. Nothing third party, nothing that you need to buy at all. except the samples. But you can get some free one-shots down below as well on the website. Plenty of really fat sounding one-shot samples to augment your drums. So in here, I've just gone for the bright chamber, just a 1 second reverb, and I've shortened that down to around 1/4 of a second. If we listen to just that reverb on its own, we'll hear a nice bright kind of ambience there. It's not a massive room, it's not an enormous sounding reverb, it's just adding a little something to the tails of the drums. It sounds weird now because we're listening to just the reverb, but wait until we bring it in. But one thing we need to do before we do that is get rid of any kind of real aggressive transients on there by using a compressor. Let's just bring the compressor in and just hear how it sounds. And I've tried to level this as much as possible so we're making a real fair comparison. So without first and then with. Okay, it's adding a load of bottom end, it's adding some brightness to that as well, and it's just adding to the overall ambience of the drums. If we take a listen to the drums without it and then with it, we're going to notice a real difference. A massive difference, and we can tailor that to exactly what we want. So let's bring it all the way down and then just start to gradually bring it in until we get the desired effect. It sounds massive, it sounds so much bigger than when we first started. So let's take a listen to how it was when we began. Bearing in mind this was recorded in a small room with a relatively inexpensive kit. It was a good drummer hitting it right, but we've been able to take that recording and really bring it up a few notches. Let's take a listen without any of that processing going on at all. Amazing. Now let's listen in with the track with the rest of the instruments and we can hear how before we didn't get as much punch through. It wasn't making that aggressive kind of rock sound that we're familiar with, but with this new processing, we're getting punch, we're getting aggression, and we're getting a real sense of ambience around the drums. A real night and day difference. I hope this is helpful for you. I hope you can implement this in some of your mixes. If you like the sound of those drums, the samples in particular, go and check them out below. There are some paid versions and some completely free versions for you to check out. Make sure you check out the rest of the channel and I'll see you again soon. Take care.